One prediction I have money on is that Spotify will get acquired in 2024.
Wow.
Check back in a year.
There's often not consensus on what the best album of the year is, but I feel like 2023 is like especially the case. Have you
Hmm.
observed that as well?
So there are a few things happening. One, I feel like bigger publications like Rolling Stone, especially like know what they're doing with this. The lists are like intentionally engineered to cause conflict. So like they'll intentionally they'll put like maybe an album that is generally liked as number one, and then number two, people are like, what is happening? Or like, why is this number two, but this other amazing album is number 50? So that's one. And I definitely got that sense this year. Um, and then I just felt like there were more lists, like many more lists this year that I remember seeing from like publications big and small.
Mm,
Um, it's very interesting to see that range, but it also like dilutes the influence of any one of them. I feel
totally.
so I kind of have a meta question now of like, what are we doing? What
Do you have an answer to the
is it?
meta
Is this
question?
like our own personal Spotify raft, but like a little classier, maybe? Yeah.
Did you have any
That's my
did you have any albums that were clear standouts of the year worth surfacing, or was it how did you feel about the year in music?
Yes, my tastes this year have been very strange, or like strange in the context of trying to put this list together because um, I discover isn't the right word. I like leaned super hard into music from like the 80s and 90s.
Mm,
So I wasn't listening to a lot of like new stuff. Um because I'm a big electronic fan, like house and disco especially, and that brings you down like a sampling rabbit hole. So I found myself trying to like uh really get to know all the original samples that were going into all these songs. As far as new albums are concerned, I'm a big fan of Jungle. They're like a indie house funk disco duo. And their album Volcano is like my most listened to album this year, at least like among new releases. They haven't released like a studio album, but I love New Jeans. They're like a K-pop group that combines also like house jungle beats behind like K-pop songwriting, which is just amazing. It's like the the epitome of like modern music culture. So I like that a lot. Yeah. So like general spheres like house, electronic, disco, and like whatever other genres will absorb those sounds and kind of experiment with them. Yeah.
mm,
But yeah,
mm.
kind of all over the place.
Love
Yeah.
it. And it definitely foreshadows some of the generative AI questions that I'm sure we're going to get to.
Mm-hmm.
But before we get there,
Mm-hmm.
tell us a little bit about you, your background, and water and music.
Yeah. My background is primarily in writing and reporting. So I spent the first 4 years of my career freelance writing for a lot of entertainment and business publications, starting out with Forbes as a contributor and then expanding to tech columns for Billboard, Music Business Worldwide, and also just writing one off pieces for Pitchfork, NPR Music, and the like. And uh, while I was doing that, I was building this newsletter and community on the side called Water and Music, which is now my full time job. But that newsletter was dedicated just to getting really deep in the weeds on music and tech. And so in my freelance writing, I would be reporting and analyzing bigger stories that were happening in music and tech, like Spotify going public, all these big tech companies trying to go into the streaming game. And then the newsletter was more focused on, or I treated it more as a creative sandbox for exploring more niche ideas, at least at the time, like digital scarcity. I was very fascinated by that concept, especially as blockchain was starting to come up kind of in the late 2010s. Um, and the community around that like started to grow a lot, especially around the pandemic, to the point where I decided to make the jump to working on water music full time. And so now we do a mix of original research and analysis. We have a lot of events. We held our first conference in May of this year and May of 2023. And we also do online education now. So we've hosted around 4 online workshops and boot camps aimed at helping music industry professionals get more tactical with the latest technologies. So we've done data analytics boot camps, Web3 community building, and many other topics as
Mm,
well.
mm. I want to get to each of those buckets in more granularity, but I'd
Mhm.
also, I think it'd be really helpful to start really broad. What are the, I guess, what are the, let's call it 2 to 4 issues that you see being most pressing in the conversation around the music industry now and what it's evolving into?
Yes, I think in a tech agnostic way, the big overarching question that I think is on a lot of people's minds is what the economics of being an artist looks like in 5 to 10 years' time. And then in turn, what the economics of the industry's biggest players on the right side, namely like record labels and publishers, what that looks like.
Mm,
So, um, and then to bring in specific technologies, AI is by far the biggest tech story, I think, in society at large, but especially in any creative industry and therefore in music. I think it feels so disruptive and is so disruptive because it starts at the point of creation. So you're thinking about the economics of being an artist. It starts at the question of who is an artist and what does like creating art look like. And just if the economics of that step changes, every other step of the industry, distribution, marketing, rights management, all of that will change as well. So yeah, AI has been a huge topic right now, at least in the incumbent music tech landscape. There's a lot of debate around recent changes that are happening to payout models from streaming services. So both Spotify and Deezer are going to be implementing changes to their services starting in 2024 that will disqualify artists below a certain streaming threshold from receiving any royalties at all. So in Spotify's case, I think if a track receives under 1,000 streams per year, they won't receive any payouts at all, and
mm,
that resets every year.
mm,
And I'm pretty sure the vast majority of content currently living on Spotify then would be disqualified from earning any money.
mm,
And to be fair, that includes there's a big like streaming fraud issue in the industry right now. So I think that would weed out a lot of bots and fraudulent actors, but it also would disqualify a lot of like human artists who are putting out their first stuff and just trying to find an audience from receiving those royalties. So um, that is yeah, big topic of debate in the industry right now in terms of like what that means just for artists' bottom lines, especially just starting out releasing their first album. But then you can also zoom out to the meta question of like yeah, what who even is an artist and like how much is that pie of artists participating in that economy going to grow and then therefore exacerbate all these other issues around payments like content oversaturation,
mm,
all that fun
mm.
stuff.
It dovetails with something that Cory Doctorow describes as enshittification, where platforms, in trying to be the monolithic provider of X service, not Twitter X, but any the variable service, tries to cater to creators, consumers, audiences, kind of back and forth in this process of it getting worse and worse and worse. Oh, and advertisers, and that basically the kind of devil's bargain that the streaming services made, Spotify in particular, was in trying to get major acts onto Spotify so that it felt like everybody was there. They cut these deals with the record labels. All the record labels, got stock that then they instantly dumped to make, a bunch of money off the original IPO and da 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 da. But that basically what this ultimately does is squeezes the artists themselves, which will over time disincentivize them from participating on those platforms. And like you're describing now, this is another shot across the bow for like a young new artist trying to make it work is going to look at this fact of like, oh, I might not even be able to make any money on my streams if I don't, hack discoverability in this particular way. Tell me a little bit more about what you're thinking about with these kind of big thorny, streaming economics questions?
Yeah, from the very beginning of my writing on this topic, I've noticed that the music industry is definitely not alone in tackling a lot of these issues, especially with AI. I think the media publishing landscape is kind of the canary in a coal mine for what the rest of entertainment and culture will experience. For example, we're seeing so many major publications like uh, BuzzFeed, CNET, Gizmodo's parent company, Sports Illustrated had a huge scandal about publishing all these AI generated articles, very often in the same breath that they're laying off a ton of their editorial staff. And so like that tension and that conflict between embracing new technology and embracing AI and then ensuring the well-being of these careers, like writers, creators, careers, it's like really on full display. And I see that potentially happening in music as well. Like as long as there are kind of corporate, short-term, profit-driven incentives and motives at play, I think we'll see that similar dynamic play out across industries, especially in music. So that's one. But then in turn, how are artists trying to learn from other industries and maybe approaching and building their careers differently? So, actually, at the start of the pandemic, I was really fascinated by a specific example of this, which was so many artists trying to navigate Twitch and Discord for the first time.
Mm,
These are two now I think pretty big like cultural platforms, but they're built for gamers. And like the features and the interactions that they're optimized for um, are much friendlier to like the gaming community, which has a very like distinct and different set of behaviors from if you're just like a music fan, listening to an artist and like that's your relationship with with a creator or with like a gaming or cultural brand. Um, and in turn, though, I saw like a lot of artists embrace those like game features. The term gamification I heard like thrown around so much more in the music industry for better or for worse sometimes. But I've been thinking a lot and doing a lot of research on that, like what um, strategies for navigating this kind of change have worked in other industries outside of music, and how is that influencing the way that artists are thinking about their careers? Like as an artist, trying to optimize for streams on Spotify or views on TikTok is a very different kind of game from optimizing for donations from viewers on Twitch or
mm,
whatever like live streaming platform you're on in terms of like the margin per user
mm.
and kind of the size of users or fans, viewers that you're focusing on. So yeah, I think we're still in the relatively early stages of that experimentation happening, given that the pandemic was only really kicked off like 3 4 years ago.
Totally. Well, and that,
Yeah.
I mean, it's December 2023. The Eminem Fortnite collab just happened. So I think this is a perfect segue to talking a little bit about the confluence of music, or what we would call the music industry, and games, and some of these like
Mhm.
big, metaverse, uh, you know, for all the sort of fraught discourse around that term. Um, there's a lot of activity at that nexus. What are you seeing? What are you seeing work? I know a lot of people had a lot of critiques of that Eminem Fortnite collaboration. As you're thinking about the ways in which the music industry is becoming gamified or becoming metaversified, what are you observing?
Yeah, so I'll start, I guess, very zoomed out. So if you look at the how revenue in the music industry and the gaming industry compare over the last few decades, one, the gaming industry is just so many times bigger than the music industry in terms of revenue.
Mm,
Newzoo is a market research firm focused on games, and in their latest report, I think the number they put for annual mobile gaming revenue was higher than the entire recorded music sector globally. So I
wow.
think the recorded music sector made around 25 26 billion, and then the mobile sector alone was like around 30 billion.
Wow.
So that just really puts it in perspective of like the difference in revenues. And I think the gaming industry also like leaned a lot harder into experimenting with different kinds of pricing around their games and the experience around them versus I feel like music streaming has kind of been stuck at $10 a month for a very long time, and like prices have only really started to increase in the last few months as
Mm,
of recording this. So um, that's just kind of the macro view of or kind of macro context of why so many artists who previously might have never talked about games in their life are like doing these kinds of Fortnite shows, trying to do these gaming partnerships because they know the revenue is there. Um, in the other direction, I think gaming companies are definitely trying to become bigger pop culture brands, and they see music as being like a really effective industry to lean on and partner with to kind of shift that framing. Like we're not just talking to gamers; we're talking to fans of pop culture in general.
right.
In terms of what I've seen work though, or kind of where tensions come into play, um, one the I guess the world of gamers is definitely not a monolith. And not only that, like gamers BS detector, I feel like is especially strong. Like if they could tell that they're being sold to, or that say an artist who's like doing this kind of activation is like not really into games, or that a company is just trying to like squeeze money out of them, I feel like gamers are like very often the loudest to kind of complain about that or just critique that. Um, and I think that's been the reason why a lot of partnerships have feel like they've fallen on deaf ears, is because the like native gaming community, so to speak, can tell that this is just like a cash grab
Mm,
and it's not really like investing in the community. Um, in contrast, the artists who have the music artists who have connected the most effectively with the gaming community are approaching it very differently. I'll take, for example, uh, okay, these people aren't really like live streaming that much anymore, but I'm just thinking of Logic as an example. I
mm,
think like early in the pandemic, he was streaming all the time, some weeks every single day, and like engaging with people on his stream and like logging on, and that's like very typical for the like creator economy lifestyle, especially on Twitch or YouTube, right? Like you log in every day, you post very frequently, and you have to engage that regularly. But that's just a very different game from what music artists are used to. But like it really requires that kind of long-term engagement over time to build that trust that then leads to like actual impact. Um, and I think for example, the first Fortnite concert in the pandemic era was from Travis Scott, who I think had definitely a deeper, like more public history with gaming before, which I think is why commercially that worked so well. Whereas Ariana Grande did like a Fortnite activation and it was written about a lot, but if you look at like the YouTube views around that concert or that experience, or like commercially, I don't think it did nearly as well, because I think
mm.
that was more clearly like, you know, big game, big pop star, let's put them together and see what happens. So yeah, there's very strong mutual incentives, but there has to be that genuine, proven interest in gaming and the interest in like engaging with like the very specific nature of the gaming community for it to really be successful long term.
And do you feel like that has shifted now that obviously the pandemic's not over, but now that those those quarantine days of pandemic are over, do you observe that changing? Like, is it still the case that fans and players are going to be hostile unless it's clear that this particular musician has a vested interest in the gaming community, or do you see it wiggling or shifting at all?
Shifting in the sense of like being a bit more lenient or
Something like that.
uh yeah. um I think a few things come to mind. One is that um in general, as Even though the pandemic is not totally over, people are definitely going out a lot more, and kind of like that lifestyle has kind of come back largely. Um, it's a lot harder to get people to like tune into an online thing all at the same
Mm,
time, unless
mm,
it's like uh unless it's the Super Bowl or something, right?
mm,
And like even then I feel like there's already like kind of a you have to like work really hard and do a ton of marketing to get that to happen. Um so it's a lot harder to make that kind of live moment online happen. Um and so you have to be a lot more convincing, or I think there's a lot more critical questioning right now of like is this something where having it online like makes it better or makes it a more interesting experience versus early on. I mean, for the first like few years of the pandemic, I would say uh there was a lot of like throwing online concert streams at the wall and just like seeing what would stick and hoping people would listen. I think there's a lot less demand for that now. And I like tracked there were so many like dozens of live streaming platforms that launched just for music over the pandemic, and most of them are not very active anymore or have been kind of acquired by bigger companies.
mm.
So yeah, so I think just by nature of people's attention, and not all of it going online now, and instead of being a lot more dispersed, it just you have to make a much more compelling argument that people stay at home and watch their screens, and then that mandates just making a better experience. My view.
Do you think it then stratifies along age? Like, I know that a lot of these virtual
Mhm.
concerts are attended by people who might not even yet be able to drive, as the folks who are of or above driving age can go back to live concerts. You know, they have their agency to go wherever they'd like to go, but young people are often less have much less optionality there. Do you see any dynamic emerging where, I don't know, the acts that appear like in Fortnite or Roblox will progressively cater toward younger audiences? Obviously, Travis Scott already did, and Lil Nas X, like a lot of the performers that have already performed. I mean, they're megastars, but also they have like, younger listeners as well. Do you see anything there?
Yeah, that's so interesting. I'm thinking through like the music gaming concert activations I've seen recently, and there's no consistency in catering to specific age groups. So Roblox, in terms of their target audience or their main users, definitely skews super young. I think like much younger than Fortnite. Um, and that said, I think Cher recently did a Roblox show, which is like not the most I feel like I feel like that might actually be smart. I have to look at the numbers around that, but that might be smart in the sense of like bringing the kids' parents in also, and being like, oh, what is Cher doing in this app that my kid is on for 3 hours a day? uh, so like Cher, Blackpink, I think also recently did a Roblox show, or like a bunch of K-pop groups, and that I guess could potentially skew younger. Um, so yeah, in terms of age groups who are spending more of their time online, I think. Oh yeah, Olivia Rodrigo has a Roblox like
Mm,
activation or virtual world. That completely makes sense. I mean, she's probably like the biggest
mm,
uh, teen pop star right now. So uh, yeah, but then yeah, Fortnite, you have like uh, Eminem being the like biggest recent example. It's definitely I wouldn't necessarily say that's like a younger it's like targeted at like teens or preteens right now. I mean, I'm sure his brand is lasting staying power for all ages. But yeah, I think when you're at that level as a gaming brand, I think you're just trying to like get whatever eyeballs you can get, I guess. And so that's why there's not as much consistency across the board. But and yeah, in terms of behavior and like who will actually tune into this stuff, it definitely skews younger. I mean, I saw this um, with my own company, not gaming related, but Discord is the main community hub for our membership. And in terms of the people who
mm,
log into Discord every day and like are willing to chat every day, it skews relatively younger, and like in our case, it's not like preteens, but like people in like their 20s and 30s, and not like 40s, 50s, 60s, like much older, you know. Yeah, I'll say that there's a loose correlation, but it's very interesting that that's not really being reflected in the kinds of artists we're seeing perform there.
I wonder if that's just a function of it being such a new phenomenon for a lot of these companies that it's kind of like poking around and seeing what. I mean, maybe Cher is wildly popular with the kids. Who knows?
Yeah, and like Cher's personality, I think, could like actually work really well if she were actually present live in this environment. That could be really fun. Uh,
Totally.
but yeah, I we did a marketing boot camp through Water Music last October, and the final session was on like new technologies like the metaverse and Web3, and we brought in marketers who had to like build those kinds of in-game concert campaigns, and like the consensus was that like the metrics for success for these kinds of activations, there's like no standard for that, because it's also like different for every single artist. Um, like you might not necessarily want to uh, sell a ton of in-game merch items. It might be more just about general brand awareness, and so I think that's also part of it. Like the consensus of what counts as successful is still being worked out in real time, and I guess they're testing out what that could look like across as many genres as they can while they still can.
Speaking of being worked out in real time, we are, as you identified, in this um, frenzied period of time with generative AI. Even though the initial kind of chat GPT hullabaloo has faded into other things, it's still reaching into every corner of every industry. Let's start really broad and then zoom in on the particular questions. What's the state of generative AI and music right now? And what are the signals of what's coming?
Yes, I would say um, generative music AI right now is where Mid Journey was in March of last year, March of 2022. So
Mhm.
when like V1 came out, or when, yeah, V1 of Stable Diffusion came out, like roughly around the same time.
Mm,
The feeling was like these models are not quite there, but they exist, and they're already really good. And
mm,
so it can only go in one direction from here. Um, and I guess to get more specific, we're seeing the very first open foundational models for music get released
mm,
at a level of quality where even if it's not commercial radio ready yet, like it's not press a button and you'll make, you know, the next pop hit, it's enough for people to to work with and start to tinker with and be inspired by it creatively. Specifically, Google actually just this week they released an updated version of a foundational model they had released earlier this year. The latest model is called Music FX, and it's a text to music interface, so similar to Midjourney. Um, Meta has the only fully open source one. So if you see any like music AI startup that has a generative music tool, very high chance that it's built on Meta's models, which are built under AudioCraft. It's like the bundle. Um, and so, yeah, basically every big tech company is trying to push research on music AI right now. Um, and so I can see. I realize I my predictions are actually a bit more aggressive than some of my peers, but I think like within 6 months we'll get to the point where you can like press a button and make it like a convincing uh, song that is like a minute, minute and a half, maybe even 2 minutes. Like I think just the pace of development and tech investment is kind of getting to that point. So yeah, say we're in early stages. Early stages, but it's happening quickly enough that like the entire music industry is reacting. So like every major label has made a statement on AI. In some cases, they've made some partnerships. Like I think YouTube is partnering with Universal Music Group on some of their voice AI stuff. So at least they're being proactive around it, at least
mm.
on the surface. So yeah, that's kind of the macro state.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like there's a lot of anxiety, particularly
Yeah.
among record labels and big artists. There was this whole hullabaloo around voice clone, like deepfake songs earlier in the year. Where has that all shaken out?
Yes. So the I think it's still shaking out, but the current state of things is that um, most major services, well, a lot of major services involved have issued statements about what is and is not allowed. So I think both YouTube and TikTok, they're both actively rolling out voice cloning features, but then they're also requiring disclosure from creators or uploaders of any like content that might have that technology involved. So I think the ideal for them is that you use their technology and then they'll automatically label it, kind of on the front end. Spotify, I think Daniel Ek, their CEO, has said that like they won't outright ban content that has AI, but if you are intentionally trying to impersonate somebody or like direct royalties away from the person that you're imitating, then that will be taken down. But the way that I guess the music industry works, artists typically upload their music through like a third party distribution tool like CD Baby or TuneCore, and there's not that much consensus around who is responsible for those kinds of takedowns or enforcement. Like, is Spotify responsible? Is the distribution platform responsible? Um, is yeah, are other kind of stakeholders responsible? So there's still a lot of like debate around that. Um, so, but in terms of like the actual usage, we've been tracking at like any music AI tool under the sun at Water and Music and try to track usage and like adoption. By far, the most widely adopted use case is voice cloning, at least compared to like text to audio generation or like use cases that are more niche for like music production in a DAW like Ableton. I think also I guess importantly, voice cloning is not just for music. I think actually Hollywood has been embracing this for a while, with like celebrities' approval. Sometimes, especially like older actors who can't use their voice in the same way with their permission, a tech company will make a clone of their older voice, from earlier movies and just have them do like an AI cameo in a movie. That's more like fan service. Like, oh, we know you want to hear from this person, and so here's kind of the best next thing.
Right.
Um, and so that's been happening for a few years now, and so like voice cloning is a lot more convincing, such that a lot more people feel like they can like lean into it and make stuff that's interesting. Whereas again, like other use cases in music AI, they're still catching up in terms of quality. Um, so yeah, policies are in place. Enforcement is still very tricky, and meanwhile, people are using it more than any other kind of tool right now. Yeah.
Totally. I mean, it seems that way. I mean, all the different. I mean, it's now we rapidly got to the point where I'll find out months later that there's a Kanye cover of somebody that I used to know or something like that. Like I
Yes.
remember when this was first happening, like when Ghostwriter dropped that Drake song, "Heart on My Sleeve." It was like it was like all over the news, and now I feel like it's just kind of like, oh, there's another sort of synthetic cover, in the style of this particular artist. One thing it got me thinking about is what mechanism of enforcement would you have? Like, say you did a voice clone. Let's take the example of Drake because there's been a ton of these Drake covers, and there's that Drake song making tool now. Say you took that and you altered his voice just enough that it still kind of sounded like Drake, but it could plausibly be somebody else. How are people thinking about enforcing copyright there? Or is that kind of like an edge case that people aren't really thinking about?
I think it's the latter. So the across the board, not just in voice cloning, but in generative AI at large, there are a lot of tools that claim to be able to watermark um, AI generations. So especially if like YouTube or TikTok, they have their own tool, presumably. Oh yes, YouTube wrote about this in their press release around their new voice cloning tool that they're experimenting with for YouTube Shorts. It incorporates some technology that Google researchers developed that supposedly is able to identify synthetic versus like genuine, real voice content and then label it accordingly. That said, seeing what's happening in like the LLM world, like with text generation, I think OpenAI, they released their own detection tool, but then kind of walked back their statements on how effective it was. Because like I think just developers, especially in the open source world, will always like find a way around those watermarks and be able to bypass them. Just the nature of humanity, you know, we'll always find a way to kind of hack the system. So uh, yeah, so that's my read on the situation is that it's really difficult, and I can see, yeah, I can see a situation where two people just have voices that are actually like very similar, or especially with maybe not with voice, but especially with music, like production styles, melodic styles that are very similar, but they're not like intentionally infringing on each other. I know that's already a huge issue with a lot of copyright infringement lawsuits right now that are happening
Mm.
in music, and AI doesn't make that easier. I think it'll just exacerbate that confusion.
Sort of cards on the table, I see the possibility of people using voice clones as potentially very productive to developing their own style. I also see, of course, the case that it simply infringes on another artist's IP, and that's kind of the end of it. I'd like to hear from you on, do you think there are possibilities for voice cloning to be productive in an artist's own personal development, even if they're going to be, very different than the artist's voices or styles that they're cloning? And if so, in what ways would you see that playing out?
Yes, this is for music specifically or
For
just in
music
general
specifically, yeah.
with any? Yes. Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of exciting examples of this now. So I would say one of the earliest examples was from Holly Herndon, who's a more experimental independent electronic artist. She and a few others around like 2018. Like there's a beatboxer named Reaps One from the UK who like built a clone of his own beatboxing style. So Holly did the same with her own voice, and the tech at the time was very rudimentary, and so the output was like intentionally very glitchy. But then Holly, specifically, I know she's talked in interviews about her model being able to generate like melodies or sounds that she didn't even think she could generate with her own voice, and it pushed her creatively to try to achieve that, and then be able to like perform that live in shows or in a recording. Um, I think that's one of the coolest use cases of generative AI at large. It's not like just automating away certain tasks for you, but it's giving you the motivation or the pathway to try the harder things and kind of to push yourself creatively and improve your own capabilities. I think that's always super cool. So that's kind of, those are more kind of creative experimental examples. Um, I think there can be a big marketing use case. So, say as an artist, you want to do voiceovers for a lot of videos you're posting on social media, especially like related to your music or the story behind your music, or you want to do voiceovers for a lot of commercials, say for like a brand partnership, but um, you don't have the bandwidth or like the resources to like do all those recordings manually. That's actually where I see AI being really effective, of course, with the artist's permission. So that's more of a marketing use case, not like creative development um, per se. And then the other main creative use case that I would love to hear more of in like actual releases is taking the idea of the alter ego to its next level. So
Mm.
like say if you have this alter ego creatively, especially one who would just talk and act completely differently from you, uh, but you maybe like don't have the confidence or you just don't have the like tonality to act on that yourself. I think that's where AI as a tool to like augment that idea that you have could be super fascinating. And especially in hip hop, I know there's like the concept of like the interlude, the mid album interlude is like very critical to album storytelling. So I'd love to like see an example of AI being used in that case to like wacky extremes. I
Oh
think it'd be
yeah.
very funny.
I mean, if you
Yeah.
could make your own Slim Shady, basically. Even
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
yes.
even
Yes.
even Harry Reeps used the various clones and robot voices that he was developing to spar, to kind of get into a battle state to progress himself to sound like a machine, which I think is not
Mm,
quite the same as what you're saying, but it gestures to that idea of like you can actually use these tools to, augment your personal self and output.
yes. Yes. Exactly.
You've been tracking the ethical questions related to generative AI for a very long time, since, as far as I can tell from your documentation, 2018, probably even earlier than that. Um, Walk me through both what the sort of general ethical considerations are with the use of generative AI, and as a follow-up question to that, have those changed over time as you've been tracking them?
I'll start with the second question, which is the ethical conversation around AI is like the one part of the AI discourse that has not really changed in the last like 30, 40 years, at least like from my reading, trying to go as far back as I can on the topic. um, in general, something I've noticed about new technology is that um, it changes and improves orders of magnitude more quickly than like our brain's ability to process it and then like act on it, let alone in like an ethical way that can be standardized and applied, across society. So uh, definitely applies to AI. I think the main issues around like creative fields, especially the the most existential one for a lot of artists on the ground, feels commercial. So like, am I going to get paid for my use of training data? Sorry, for my artwork being used as training data for this model. So it's issues around compensation, crediting, general data transparency, which is ongoing issue that has gone up to the government level. I think recently a lot of governments, a lot of countries have come together to undersign documents. Like there's one on like ethical oversight of AI systems that I know OpenAI and Google and Microsoft are all involved in. Um, the EU is expected to officially approve, I think, the first major set of AI regulations that would require reporting, transparent reporting on data, also on like energy usage, cybersecurity, all those like very big macro issues. So yeah, that's kind of the commercial implications. There's the issue of bias. So um, are these AI models just going to be a mirror to the biases that already exist on a very deep level within society? And if so, what are the implications of those biases being spread at such a large scale and being like incorporated so rapidly into tools that hundreds of millions of people are using every day? Um, and kind of what are balances that are being put in place to kind of counter that? Um, that's one. I guess the other side of the data transparency side is just like data privacy, and kind of user consumer protections, right? So like whatever I put into ChatGPT or whatever other tools that incorporate GPT-4, for example, like through
Mm.
their API, is that data safe? So that's just an extension of ongoing kind of consumer privacy issues. And then I guess yeah, I mentioned environmental sustainability, and then the final main category is kind of more like macroeconomic around um, issues like wealth distribution. Like, will wealth be even more concentrated at the top? Um, like job prospects and unemployment. Like, are governments preparing for that, or like planning the impact of AI on that aspect of society? Um, kind of like general productivity and like economic growth, and kind of what are the tensions between all of those together. So yeah, those are all very big issues that have been at the forefront of the AI ethics discussion for as long as that discussion has existed. Definitely the main difference now is the extent of adoption of this technology, right? Like now there are like dozens of millions of people regularly using ChatGPT. At this point, billions of dollars poured into these companies that are developing this technology. And so the questions just become a lot more urgent, and we're seeing that like reflected in policies actually being passed through governments, content policies finally being implemented at these bigger tech platforms,
Mm,
and so on.
mm.
Yeah.
With everything you're saying, I can imagine if I were a young musician, I would feel really daunted at the prospect of trying to even do it. Um, not for the love of the game, but to do it as a in pursuing a career path. Is that something that you're seeing when you're conducting these workshops through Water and Music?
Yes, I recently actually spoke at a university. This was primarily to an undergraduate audience, and and this was like a music industry program. And so I was expecting, or went in thinking, oh, these are like younger people who are much more like tech savvy. They're going to love AI and have so many thoughts on it. And then at the beginning, the person who was like leading the talk um, survey the audience, like how many of you are excited about AI right now? And 3 out of like 80 people raised their hand. And I was like, oh wow, so the fear is actually totally trickling down to younger people who are serious about making a career out of working in music,
Mm,
whether like being an artist or working with artists. So that fear is definitely there. That said, through all the research and workshops we've done at Water Music, a lot of times there's a lot of like existential angst and fear without grounding it in a practical examination of what these tools actually can and cannot do right now. And
mm,
very often we found that just giving people a first step to get hands on with a tool, like try writing lyrics with this tool, or try like incorporating this tool into this step of your production workflow, people get a much clearer understanding both of the possibilities of the tech, but also the limitations, and where they as like a human being can still still like step in, have the last word, have a more um, valuable perspective in the context of what they're trying to achieve with their music and their creativity. So um, yeah, that's whether, and so I incorporated demos into this kind of like undergraduate talk, intentionally like trying to show these students that yes, even though the tech will improve, um, like these models are still like limited in what they can do, and so like the best thing that you can do now is get hands on with them and understand those limitations, so that you can like foresee what will happen ahead and kind of get ahead of that,
mm,
and think more longer term accordingly. Um, but yeah, I tend to be more of an optimist when it comes to like human resilience. Like I think people who I think if people think that AI is going to, or like people will use AI to eliminate like any creator's job, they just won't see creative people as valuable. Um, I think that is an insult to the like creative spirit of humanity. Like we'll
mm.
always find like more creative ways to use this tech to like push ourselves, to push what's possible in culture. I very much believe in that personally. So that's also I guess my own personal like message that I try to give, like whether to students or to like people working in the industry who are trying to, or who are like worried about their um their future. Like yeah, we all have very unique and interesting stories that we can still bring to the table, you know.
Totally.
Yeah.
And people still
Yeah.
want to experience art from other people. I think there's
Yes.
definitely we're definitely open to experiencing art from machines, but I think there's a threshold of how many machines or synthetic personalities we want to experience art from, and it's a much smaller percentage than the people we want to experience art from. I think that what I observe across a lot of industries, and I think music, we will see a similar dynamic, though of course distinct in ways that I wouldn't be able to recognize, is that it's a lot of the concept and sketch and entry level work that is under threat. And I think that is a big problem in many cases from an industry standpoint. But the need for artists who have a unique perspective, who have thought critically about the questions they're asking or the statements they're trying to make, and they're doing so with, passion and vigor, we still want those people. And so I tend to agree with you. I feel concerned for the, yeah, those entry level jobs that help people get their kind of feet under them within an industry. I think I've heard from some of the producers I've spoken to a lot of anxiety because of the way in which generative AI is really right now seems most effective at beats generation, even more so than voice cloning, because we only need beats to be so good to hit a certain threshold of like, oh, that's good enough. There's obviously like, it's not an expert level, produced track, but it's good enough. Whereas with a voice, if it's not at a really high level of fidelity, you're going to feel kind of like, oh, that's a little bit off, and I don't really want to deal with that. Um, so yeah, I mean, I say all that to kind of echo back that I think a lot of what you're saying really, really resonates. Did you find that the students were receptive when you said that?
Um, I Some of them were, and I think I've spoken to um some like professors. I think the right thing to do if you're like teaching a class on music tech right now, like the right thing to do um is to put these AI tools into students' hands, I think, and be like, make a song and document your process and like tell me how you're responding. Very similarly, there's a lot of existential angst in academia or like in the education system right now about the usage of ChatGPT. Um, like teachers are using it to grade, students are using it to write their essays, and so it's just like, are we having these like AI models just talk to each other in this very like kind of detached way? Um, but I think the best educators are using ChatGPT as an educational tool and also as a way to like connect with students and get them to think more critically. For example, I've heard of teachers like in front of students using ChatGPT to like generate an essay on this historical topic, and then they print it out, and it's like, and then they tell the student, fact check this for me, or like edit this. Like what would you do differently, um, or like what perspectives did this not consider? So I think there are, I think it definitely takes more than just like saying things will get better. Like, yeah, I think that will only go so far. I think like getting hands on and getting scrappy and experimental is definitely the best way to kind of like understand your place within the wider ecosystem and kind of like clarify your thesis on it, as opposed to like not engaging with it and just like sitting in fear that is mostly speculative. That's definitely just my general philosophy. Yeah.
Mm. And you practice what you preach. Tell us a little bit about egg roll.
Yes, yes. So at Water Music, we do a lot of hands-on experimentation as a way of just like learning more about the technology and being able to experiment more authoritatively with it. So like we've released our own NFTs in the past to raise funds for our research, and so that's definitely given us a window into the limitations of blockchain technology, for example, but also the potential of it.
Mm.
Um, AI is a perfect example. So our main AI researcher on our team, his producer name is Young Spielberg, and everything that he and I have both learned about AI, we've learned just by experimenting and just like trying every tool that's out there and then building our own thesis on those tools and the market at large from there. Um, and for fun, I guess, as like a way to put this to practice and also document the experience as a learning tool, we put out our own Grimes AI song called Egg Roll. Um, So it kind of came from an inside joke, separate, like completely separate from this AI conversation in terms of the topic. Like there was an ad we walked by, that had a plate of egg rolls on it that looked like cigars, and we're like, that's amazing. This should like totally be a song about this energy, like very dark, chaotic energy around egg rolls. Um, and then we recorded the song. It kind of was sitting on Young's hard drive, and then Grimes came out with her voice AI model that mimicked kind of at least the way her voice sounds in a lot of her songs, which is more like definitely higher pitched, a bit sassier. And then Young messaged me and was like, "This is what's missing. This is what the song needs. Should we try recording this?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh, yes." The Interestingly, the process was still like very manual and quote unquote traditional from a producer standpoint. AI only played the step of transforming my voice into the Grimes AI voice,
Mm,
but Young still like produced it pretty manually on his side. Like it definitely, like all the instrumentation and the songwriting was like still done by hand, so to speak.
mm.
Um, but yeah, we like submitted it to Grimes's own portal, not expecting anything out of it, and then we heard back like a week later from their team being like, "Wait, the song is amazing. We should like this should be released as an official Grimes AI track." And we're like, "Okay, yeah, let's do it." And so just going through that process of uh, yeah, like working directly with the Grimes team to have it be an official Grimes AI track and not just having it live in the ether, and seeing their team also like embrace that and not be fearful of it. I think I understand why more artists haven't leaned into that, but I do think that's like a model for what is to come. Like artists leaning into the tool, encouraging fans, other creators to like make songs or make art inspired by their aesthetic, and using AI as a tool to facilitate that, and then just building this wider creative ecosystem uh, around it. And I know like yeah, I think at this point there are several hundred officially approved Grimes AI songs on streaming services, and it's like on her own profile, and it's like been a launching pad for a lot of like indie artists and producers also. So, uh, yeah, if you want to stream it, it's called Egg Roll. It's on the Grimes AI profile. But like above all, it was just like very eye opening to be part of that like official AI release process, and also to see that it's like actually not that different from how music releases normally work. It's just
Mm.
that this technology enabled us to express ourselves creatively in ways that we literally physically could not have done otherwise, at least with that voice.
And do you have experience singing, or was this something that you were doing because you knew that it was going to be translated into Grimes's voice?
I hadn't officially released any music before, but I was in a choir in college. So
Got it.
I enjoy singing. I'm a big karaoke person. I'll like take up any offer for a karaoke night. Um, but no, I was thinking about this like on a personal level. My Yeah, I think being able to lean on something like Grimes AI to like access that part of my expressive self, like help me become a bit more confident, I think, in singing, or like I don't know when the next song is going to be released by like Cherie slash X artist AI. But I think it's just much more plausible. I see it as a much more plausible path versus like um, in the past, like not really knowing where to start or like where the first avenue would be. I think I appreciated the general experimental community and the openness of the community around Grimes AI, so that like made me more confident in participating as well.
Cool. Do you think that you referenced this being a mod, like a viable model for artists in the future? It seems like a lot of the economic models that could work in the future, it's still like a big TBD, are gearing toward volume, where it's like micropayment and royalties across a number of different offerings rather than, hoping people buy your CD.
Yes. So something that we always say at Water Music, and it's definitely worth bringing here, is that there's no cookie cutter formula for success or growth. Every single artist is different. Every genre, fan base, scene is different. Um, Grimes is such a specific like artist and brand. Um, One, she at least has a very strong association with Elon, and so she like that's a big like, and then also she herself as an artist even before that like very much embraced new technology and new tech experimentation, so that has helped her certainly benefit from all the new stuff that she's tried. Like she had, I think, one of the top 5 NFT sales of 2021, and she like definitely took advantage of that hype in February. So she just like has that community of like early tech adopters around her who won't be as um, immediately dismissive of like any new thing that she tries.
Mm.
It's definitely not every artist, and she also has a big enough brand where she can like achieve that level of scale of having, you know, hundreds of Grimes AI songs that are approved featuring other artists. Um, that model definitely does not necessarily apply to all artists. In general, all trends are pointing towards like average per stream royalty rates going down. I think they've gone down by about 50% since Spotify first launched in the US, and that's for many reasons. There are just so many more players in the market in terms of artists participating. As these streaming services get more free users, especially globally, that drives the average per stream payout rate down. So, um, streaming in general is not viable for most artists as an income stream. And I think AI may exacerbate that issue, or certainly doesn't like improve those fundamental payment rails. Um, that said, as like it can really help for fan engagement, but of course it has to funnel into like monetizing the general brand or creative ethos in some other way that's higher margin, whether that's merch. I think it's very interesting that like the live business, I guess pandemic notwithstanding, has kind of continued to grow and like has grown in value. Grimes herself has actually talked about this concept of like low tech zones potentially being really valuable in the future. Like you can go to this zone and be guaranteed that like no AI is being used, or there's like no phone recording, or it's like literally going back to like being around a campfire, right, and like singing around a campfire. Like this is the and that will be increasingly treasured in the future. Um, so I can see like kind of the live sector continuing to grow and being even more valuable as a result of that. So uh, yeah, so I see more artists embracing AI, but definitely like the focus of the economics of being an artist will probably shift away from just the content, given how much volume is going to be of that content or like
Mm.
media online, and more around like what experiences can you build and curate to like make that media most impactful, whether it's live shows, like kind of more closed communities, online and offline, physical versions of that media, like merch, physical formats in general. Yeah.
So you referenced Grimes and Grimes's NFT sales, and I'm wondering, Water and Music, at one point, I believe it still is a DAO. Maybe it's changed, but at one point you formulated it as a DAO. You've observed the industry. What's happening at the intersection of music and blockchain?
Mm, big question. So yes, water music. I would say we experimented with a lot of like DAO type methods of coordination and compensation. So our the core leadership was always like it never got to a level of like nouns level decentralization. There definitely was like myself at the helm, but then like a kind of a core team of that was like pretty tight knit. but we ran a lot of these very large scale collaborative research sprints where we involved dozens of contributors in the community who could just step up and like offer to contribute in some way, and they would all get a cut of revenues from these NFTs that we sold retroactively to support our research, and like experimented um, with that model. There are a few reasons why we have put a hold on that for now, and I think they're in parallel with what we're seeing in the DAO landscape at large. One is that coordination, especially in a decentralized way, is very expensive. It still was like a very manual process. And I think we found that was the case for a lot of any decentralized media company. If you asked like what their challenges were, it was always like maintaining consistency of voice across like larger group of contributors, coordinating in a way that still felt efficient and that led to a better like outcome, like an actually good article or report. That was just always very challenging. Whereas like a lot of people who were part of the water music community, they were just like music industry professionals who just uh, wanted to know what was happening and then like kind of move on with their day. So we're just kind of going back to thinking about, okay, what does the what does the people, what do the people who are paying for our stuff like uh, actually want, and how can we like really nail down and streamline the product around that, and then like build improved coordination around that to um, serve that product as best as possible. I actually think um, AI, not to keep going back to AI, but I actually think AI can improve a lot of the challenges that we ran into, especially with like keeping voice consistent and giving people tools to like self edit more easily. That was just a big challenge for us in like the writing stage. Um, like giving the Nouns DAO has actually built a lot of interesting tools to give context using AI on everything that's like been talked about across the community in the DAO. Like if you're new to that community, so that you can get up to speed and make more informed like governance decisions, for example. Um, so this like idea is still like top of mind in my head to try in the future, because I think it'll actually be a lot lower cost to try. But that was one challenge. There's also a big legal question mark around DAOs. I think at least in the U.S., the SEC is cracking down on um, starting with a lot of NFT communities. I think they've fined a lot of NFT communities claiming that they weren't securities, but they actually were, at least as the SEC was claiming. So it's like not the friendliest environment, I would say, to like move fast and break things, because you might be fined like you know upwards of millions of dollars. So just being cautious. But yeah, like we gave a token that had we had a fungible token called Stream that still exists. Like it's not deleted, and you can like there are hundreds of people who still have that in their wallet as a um, signal that they like contributed to this research project, and that could be like tied to specific releases we did. So that's great. And just thinking from like a long term perspective of like trying to do those experiments again, it's great to like have that information so we can like engage those contributors in the future if they're interested in still participating. Um, and as far as music Web3 is concerned, um, in general, it definitely is a bear market right now still for NFTs, for any kinds of tokens, and especially for music NFTs. And there's a really interesting trend that's been happening where um, sales have gone from being framed as digitally scarce and higher priced. So like buying one NFT for like the USD equivalent of $1,000. That's like definitely not top of mind for a lot of people anymore. Instead, it's selling a higher volume of lower priced NFTs, um, where the benefit is more like community access. So I think Black Dave is probably the best example of an independent artist who sells a token for like super super cheap, um, and it just gives you access to his Telegram chat. But like that Telegram chat is like the most active and also spicy chat for just like any debate around like music web3 stuff happening right now. So it's a very like well curated kind of self-selected community of people. And then the idea is that you get like benefits from the artist, direct access to the artist. He's super active in the chat too, kind of as part of that. So it's more like shifting towards giving community access for lower cost. That said, I can see it just bringing us back to square one in terms of um, creating a pressure to scale, which
Mm,
was a lot of the challenges artists saw in streaming, in like the streaming and social world, and that they wanted to escape with things like NFTs. But now in a bear market, they're kind of like pressured to push and sell a higher volume of tokens again. Um, Again, not inherently bad. I just it does strike me how similar it is to a lot of the conversations that were happening kind of pre NFT hype cycle. And then also like as a result, a lot of the bigger artists who have like gotten big in Web3 are debating like, oh, should I actually, is it actually worth signing to a label because they have like relatively more marketing resources and connections that I need to get to the next stage beyond just like catering to Web3 native people? Should I like build out my team? And so they're asking a lot of the same very evergreen, um, long-standing traditional questions that any working artist has been asking themselves. So I kind of see that's my read on the current state. It's like because it is a bear market, a lot of the challenges and questions artists are asking are actually converging with uh, what has been happening in the industry for a very long time.
did the NFT explosion and the, you know, subsequent interest in blockchain as a technology intersected with music meaningfully change any of the conversations that you're describing that we're now kind of looping back to? Like, did it did it did it lead to certain artists having more knowledge of particular ideas, whether that's related to technology or related to, you know, copyright infringement, or I don't know, like from where you sit, did you see change because of that?
I saw um, a general shift. So I guess also stepping back, there was a first like blockchain hype cycle around 2014 to 2017 that was more focused on applying blockchain to rights management. So the way that like rights are managed and the way that you find out like who owns what, like so there's no central source of truth for who owns how much of what song, and all that data lives in like dozens of different places. And there's like there are assistants who spend so much of their time like emailing back and forth trying to piece together like why do the ownership shares on the song add up to more than 100 and trying to find the correct information. So there was like a big pitch from a lot of blockchain founders at that time of applying blockchain to streamlining that process. They quickly found that was very difficult because it required consensus from all these major rights organizations who were like very slow to adapt to new tech, and also were very political about like sharing data or keeping data secret. Um, so that hype cycle died down. What I appreciate about this more recent hype cycle is that the conversation shifted entirely from like we need to get the major labels on board to we need to help like these artists be as scrappy as they can and like experiment and figure out what works. So it's like it really was independent artists specifically who set the precedent for everyone else in the industry, with like the major corporations mostly like playing catch up and building off of that. So um, I think that general mindset is really cool. And I think, you know, if slash whenever the next Web3 hype wave, development wave comes back, I think that will be, I think it'll also like lean on that of like, let's see what these artists who know themselves and their fan base is the best, let's see what they're doing and kind of build the standards and use cases off of that. Um, it did I guess in general the hype cycle. happened in parallel with some of the most critical conversations that I've heard about streaming in general in my career. I think especially with the pandemic, it just opened so many people's eyes to just how little money was in streaming for the typical artist.
Mm, mm,
And seeing what was possible with an NFT model where it was like more about this idea of digital scarcity of like um, just finding these like few people who are willing to pay that much money to support your art. Um, I'm always for just opening people's minds up to alternatives and encouraging them to experiment beyond the status quo. So I think that spirit is still very much there. It's just a lot more constrained by resources available, at least in just the Web3 side.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think it's still sleeping, and kind of when the market goes back to a state of growth, I think we'll see a lot of that same spirit in action again.
Well, let me ask you, because we are getting glimmers over the past few weeks. It could be a total head fake, but that the market might be tipping bullish. If that is the case, let's say if that is the case now, or whenever it might happen to be the case in the future, what lessons from this past cycle do you hope to see brought into a future cycle? Because a lot of critics would say, well, a lot of the sort of claims that Web3 advocates were making, um, the community wasn't really living up to. It became a vehicle for cash grabs and greed, et cetera. And I acknowledge the validity of many of those critiques. I also see the the value of this technology to potentially live into some of its ideals. So yeah, from your perspective, what do you hope we take from last time into whenever next time is?
Yes, I think the main thing I hope to see more of is research ahead of time on what fans actually want or what they actually like, and
Mm,
building communication around that. I think, yeah, at large, a lot of music NFTs, because of the novelty factor, were sold with the main source of value being the fact that it was an NFT. And like, oh, don't you want to own this and see your name attached to this on the blockchain? Very much like a tech centric selling point, which maybe works for a Web3 native buyer or collector, but for like an average music fan who just likes this artist's music, or like wants to hang out with other fans and doesn't really care about the financialization aspect of like the secondary NFT market, or doesn't care that much about the blockchain as a concept. I think the pitch just has to be fundamentally different. And a shift that I've seen accordingly is that a lot of the bigger like NFT driven community platforms in music, so Royal is a big one on like the royalty side, Medallion is a big one on the community side. They don't use the term NFT at all on their website or in their marketing copy. If you like go into their FAQ, they'll mention that like these technically are NFTs, but the pitch to like joining a community or engaging is much more about like what you, the fan or user, will get out of it on like an emotional or like almost spiritual level. So like uh yeah, so I would just encourage artists who, and then kind of on the flip side, there are a lot of artists who, if they did any research on fan sentiment around NFTs, would not have released it because they would find that there was just so much negative reaction. In contrast to someone like Grimes, where I think there wouldn't be as much of an issue because like so much of her following is already very crypto native or like interested in new tech. Whereas I distinctly remember Charlie XCX had and it was a charitable NFT drop. She like donated all the funds to some like nonprofit for girls in tech. So it was like a great cause, but like when she posted about it on Twitter, almost like unilaterally the reaction from fans was negative. And I think like that was true across the board for a lot of pop artists, um, in a way that I think could have been prevented with just a bit more uh, like I guess research on just fan sentiment around the technology. So knowing that now and having gone through those like uh kind of gone through that hardship, definitely would encourage that as a first step. Being more empathetic to um, like what fans actually need or are excited about, and kind of meeting them where they are with this very new technology.
So we've talked a lot about AI. We've talked a lot about blockchain. You tweeted recently, or rather, you described music tech. You described music tech hype cycles as an Ouroboros, and I'd love if you could outline what that snake eating its tail cycle is, just in rough steps, not in any high degree of
Oh
detail.
yes, I think this might actually be referring to two different things. So the Ouroboros thing is a little shorter, so I'll start with that. One personal project that I've been doing, and I'm very shortly publishing like a longer analysis of, is how ownership in music tech companies has changed over time. And in particular, not only do like private equity firms and banks basically own everything, so like they're taking stakes in like, which is true for society, but especially in music, like the private equity firm just announced they're acquiring one of like the two big public performing rights organizations in the US. So they they collect royalties from like live performances, from radio broadcasts on behalf of songwriters. Um, so like they're buying out the uh, basically, yeah, one of the biggest companies in that world. Uh, who else? Francisco Partners owns like Native Instruments, and they just invested in like Muse Group, which owns a bunch of like these like creator tool companies. So private equity companies own everything. There are also a lot of like streaming services and labels that all own equity stakes in each other, and it's kind of just this like endless loop. You kind of wonder like where this is all going, or just like the vested interest. Just there's so many layers to dig into. So that's kind of the ownership Ouroboros. In terms of music tech hype cycles, that's more like history repeating itself. Like every tech hype cycle in music, I feel like is very similar. For I won't go into all the reasons, but one very common theme is that founders, especially who are not native to the music industry, will come in being like, labels are dead. We're gonna like revolutionize the music business, down with the man kind of thing, and then they realize, especially if they're in the content business, they need money from the man to, or they need a licensing deal with the man to even host the content on their platforms, or else risk getting sued into oblivion. So that's a very common pattern of like rights being a major bottleneck for a lot of these founders. There's a very common trend also of what else? I have a whole list of like, I mean, just in general, tons of like copycat platforms without a clear vision on like how a technology will actually change creativity or the economics of being an artist. Like we're seeing this with music AI now. There's so many like text to music tools being developed, or like music AI tools coming up. At one point, there was like a like deep fake song discovery platform where you could discover every like fake Drake song that was made. And I was like scrolling through them at one point, listening and being like, what is the point? Like, I guess this is interesting now, I guess, because of the novelty, but after a while it's like, yeah, what are we doing here? Like what is the actual vision? Um so yeah, I think just again, because tech uh improves and grows at a much faster pace than our ability to process it and like build new mental models around it, we just like react in the same way. And I've seen that with like so many different like mini hype cycles, like Web3, live streaming, social audio with Clubhouse, metaverse to an extent. Yeah, it's all very similar patterns.
Mm. Now's the part of the show where we do a few recurring questions.
Cool.
So, and you've answered some of these to a little bit, so feel free to repeat yourself.
Hmm.
But what is one resource you recommend for making better sense of reality?
Making better sense of reality.
And it can be specific to music, obviously, given your area of research.
The role that I tried to play in um, people's lives, especially in like the music industry, is being their bird's eye view when they otherwise wouldn't be able to have that view. So like being able to zoom out and say like, here are connections among things that you um, might not otherwise see, but that like can help you kind of foresee what's going to happen in the industry in the future. In that vein, there are a few companies I would recommend. One is they're mostly a consulting firm called Media Research, MIDIA, but they have a really good blog where they publish a lot of interesting takes on more on like news as it happens in the music industry, but using frameworks that um, are are evergreen and are meant to help you connect dots between like different news and just like process things better. So I'd mention that. I and this is like a uh, I guess this is a general category of content that I think is very underrated. Like very long form YouTube explainer videos is probably like my favorite genre of analysis right now. I've watched a lot of long form analysis of like films. This is okay. This is a specific video called The Marvelization of Cinema that I highly recommend anyone who's interested in, if you're like especially burnt out by all these Marvel movies coming out or how everything is kind of just like franchised to the point of feeling soulless, watch that video. Amazing, like 30 minutes. And then um, Fox had a really good recent long form video on like what happens when AI does all your homework. And they like did a really good job of laying out um, how complex the issue is. Like there's no consensus among students and teachers about how best to proceed. So lots of different answers, just anything with like
Love it.
a that gives a bird's eye view. Definitely check out Midia's frameworks and then like take a deep breath and then watch a lot of these long form videos. Guaranteed to open your mind,
Love it.
I think.
Love it.
Yes.
What is one thing you wish people paid more attention to?
Definitely wish people paid more attention to um, like cultural scenes that are happening internationally, especially beyond like the surface level mainstream. For a while, for example, I've been super interested in like indie rock and hip hop scenes that have come out of Korea, which have such a different spirit from like the K-pop that people normally are listening to and hearing about. Parts of K-pop are amazing, but definitely like uh, not taking not taking like that view of the industry as like the single homogenous thing that is happening, and
Mm,
instead encouraging people to kind of like dig deeper into um, smaller scenes that were bubbling up. I think it's just more interesting. It's more fun. They tend to have more interesting like perspectives on the world. So yeah, I'd say that.
okay, so follow up, maybe like sub question to that question is: do you have any recommendations for how people find those communities as they're trying to,
Mm,
improve their awareness and taste?
yes. There's a blog and also new consulting services firm around it called Hivewire that focuses on music in just any international market outside the US and Europe. It's called Hivewire. It's run by this amazing woman, Swishti Das, who has like been working in these markets for her whole career. And she writes a lot about these like scenes you otherwise or artists you otherwise would never have known about who are doing the most interesting things with their music, especially on like social media, like whether on Instagram or kind of more like regional social apps. So just like seeking out those kinds of specific kinds of blogs. In terms of music, I have been spending more time recently on SoundCloud, which like is a service that I feel like a lot of people have forgotten about. Like, I guess understandably, um, they definitely haven't grown as much as a lot of the bigger streaming services, but um, they on SoundCloud, it's still one of the most social music streaming apps out there. So
Mm,
if you like an artist, you can see all the stuff that they've liked, and you
mm,
can see all the people that they follow, and that very often is like the best entry point into the most unexpected rabbit holes. And even the way that SoundCloud's like autoplay algorithm works Um, it just feels a lot more chaotic than like Spotify's, which I feel like is more about like trying to keep you. It's not trying to challenge you. It's trying to like keep you in this lane. Whereas SoundCloud is like much more open to just throwing you in this one direction and like seeing what you think. So for music listening, I would definitely encourage that. Like whatever new artists you're interested in, see if they're on SoundCloud or if similar artists are there and just like dig into their social history. And I think you'll be surprised.
Let the chaos reign.
Yes, yes.
And the final recurring question, what is one time your reality or sense of reality was disrupted?
Kind of a cliche but very true answer is the pandemic, because a lot of my and it wasn't disrupted so much as I guess like changed in a very significant way, because my a lot of my closest friends now are friends who I met like completely online during that time during the pandemic. And like I didn't see myself as a Discord user. I didn't really see myself as like a gamer, but I like developed such a great appreciation for like that as like a way of spending time and like connecting with people, and it's definitely changed my personal also professional view on like kind of where that world is going. Um and uh yeah, I mean, I think as with so many other people, it definitely like changed my perspective on like the kinds of experiences I'm trying to seek out in life, kind of what I want to prioritize in life. So that's one. Two, there's a very specific experience where the summer before college, I was vacationing with my family in Paris, and my and we were there for quite a while, for like a week, and then towards the end of the week, my mom uh, was like so exacerbated. She was like I haven't had Chinese food in 5 days. I need to find a Chinese restaurant, or else I'm gonna like throw up or something. And I was like, okay, okay, well we'll find a Chinese place. Um, and we find a restaurant, and that was the first time that I saw like a native Chinese person speaking French. So it was the owner of the restaurant who spoke like completely fluent Chinese with my mom, because they're just making small talk about our vacation. And then she went to this like totally French family and started speaking French with them. And I guess I had only grown up like with other Asian Americans, and like that being kind of the duality of like the Asian experience I knew of. And so to see this combination in Paris, I was like, oh my god, there's more. Which like now in hindsight, it's like, yeah, of course. There's like so many Asians in different countries who like can't speak English, but that was a very cool opening up of reality. Uh like, oh, there's like so much more of like the Asian experience globally to dive into. So uh yeah,
I love that.
very random, but
Well, to carry
yeah.
a rant, and this is not nearly as rich as that memory, but I just remember the first time I had Mexican food in Spain and seeing the different
Mm.
ways that Spanish people made Mexican food. It was a similar type of like, oh, got it, right. Of course it'd be
Yeah.
different.
Yes. Yes.
Awesome. I guess one other question on like in this line of questioning is what was a formative album for you?
Interestingly, I'll say two, both hip hop albums. Very conflicted about the first one, just given his role in society now. But Kanye West, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, easily like one of the most formative albums of my teen years, because I listened to it also when I like first discovered Tumblr and was like scouring Tumblr pages for like really weird random remixes, and there was like really good discourse happening on all the blogs I was following around that album, and it just like opened my mind up to like what was possible musically in the genre. So
Mm,
that, very similarly to Pimp a Butterfly
mm,
by Kendrick Lamar. I also like had a big like jazz phase leading up to that, and so to see how he combined all these different genres and styles so seamlessly into telling this such like a fervent story in this album was super inspiring to me. Yeah, I listened to that. I I was like my sophomore year of college, and I was like alone in my room, lights off, just like listening to that on loop. So yeah, very impactful and kind of solidified my hip hop fandom, and just which is like kind of stayed to this day. So
Amazing.
yeah,
I remember both of those albums. I remember where I was when I first listened to both of those albums. So I
yeah, nice.
totally feel you. I guess my last question for you is you made a big prediction around generative AI earlier in the show. Is just, do you have any other big predictions about the state of music and technology for the year 2024?
Yes. One prediction I have money on is that Spotify will get acquired in 2024.
Wow.
Check back in a year.
Yeah. Do you have
But
a guess
especially
by whom?
with, okay, I want it to be like a cool company, but I think it'll be like it'll be an expected like big media conglomerate like Disney, or even I wouldn't be surprised if it was like uh uh even more boring like CBS or something. Like it's just some big like media conglomerate. But especially with the recent layoffs that happened, which like were surprising to a lot of people both inside and outside the company, and the phrasing that Daniel Ek had around his memo, where it's like, we in this next phase as a company, we need to be as lean as possible and resourceful as possible, focus on profits. I feel like the writing's on the wall. So
Mm,
that's my prediction.
boom. Bold.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yes.
if I see that news in the year 2024, you're the first person I'm gonna reach out to.
Cool. Sounds good.
Cool. So yeah, any places where people can find you and your work?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at Cherie Hu 42. I'm on Instagram, the Sherry Doctor, which is my like egg roll artist name. Sherry there is spelled Sherry. If you look up the Sherry Doctor, I'm on Instagram. Um, Water and Music is my company name. Water _and_ music on Twitter and Instagram. And both me and the brand are on LinkedIn, pretty active there as well.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to come on Urgent Futures today.
Yeah, thank you so much again for having me.
This podcast is edited and produced by Adam Labrie and me, Jesse Damiani. The podcast is presented by Reality Studies. You can learn more by visiting realitystudies.co. And if you appreciate the work I'm doing, please subscribe and share it with someone you think would enjoy it.